Welcome back to my channel, my dear friends and viewers. Today, we will commence our journey exploring Australian three interrelated challenges and how it appears to tackle them, and maybe how it should be tackling it. The interrelated challenges faced are in front of your screen: climate, energy, and AUKUS, and which is a defense deal, in case people not familiar with AUKUS. In simple words, Australia is at a crossroad. Do we arm up or should we power forward? Let us explore how Australia's climate goals clash with AUKUS defense spending and if these priorities are compatible. Um, the climate energy security nexus, Australian energy transition, 43% emission cut by 2030. That's Australia's legislative act, Climate Change Act 2022. They have pledged to bring it down by 43% by 2030. Defense sector, according to a report, is emitting approximately 5.5% of global emissions. Is still unregulated under Paris Agreement, according to the Guardian report, January 9, 2024. Opportunity cost of funds less for renewable energy and indirect impact of carbon emission by associated industry in the defense steel. Conflict is renewable rollouts lags as defense spending soars. Australian dollar more than $50 billion on AUKUS for this financial year. The best estimate we have is that militaries are responsible for 5.5% of global greenhouse gas emission. A September 2020 study by our worldindata.org revealed that our world emits about 50 billion tons of greenhouse gases. Out of it, energy and transport sector contributes nearly 73.2%, agricultural, forestry, and land use around 18.4%, cement and chemical and other industries 5.2%, whereas waste, landfill, and wastewater, etc., contribute 3.2%. If the global military were a country by itself, this would have been placed in the fourth behind USA, China, and India, the three highest emitting countries globally. Militaries are highly fossil fuel dependent, and while net zero targets have opened up debates around military decarbonization, AUKUS amplifies Australia's climate energy dilemma. While the government pledges renewable defense emissions are, to quite an extent, off the books, Australia's largest naval base in Western Australia, HMAS Stirling, diesel dependency operations mirror systemic gaps, including but not limited to number one, energy security, over reliance on fossil fuels. Number two, climate decarbonization. Australia's slow transition to renewable in defense contrasts with global net zero goals. Number three, defense preparedness. Diesel dependence could hinder operational agility, for instance, refueling, logistics, etc. In short, our naval base's diesel dependence isn't just about fuel, it's a warning sign. If our naval bases aren't prepared for the energy transition in Australia, is Australia ready for future threats? More dodgy colleges dodgy colleges to fake documents, migrants, applicants, diesel dependent bases, Australia bandit solutions are failing. Time for long term fixes. If greenhouse gas emission stops tomorrow, according to ICEDS.ANU research, it states the impact of climate change will continue to increase due to past emissions. Under a relatively optimistic low emission scenarios, the cost of national natural disasters in Australia is estimated to grow to $73 billion per year by 2060. The Climate Council in Australia demands defense emission tracking. You cannot green wash a warship. For those who are not familiar, Climate Council it's Australia's leading independent climate communication non-profit council. AUKUS versus climate commitments. Contradictions. 50.3 billion in 24-25 for defense as part of 330 billion integrated investment program towards 2033-34 versus 8 billion for renewable low emission tech. AUKUS subs 60 years lifespan also conflicts with 2050 net zero climate emission targets. Risk stranded assets if sub-tech clashes with the net zero laws. Infrastructure becomes obsolete due to climate policies. Solution: link AUKUS contracts to clean energy investments. For example, naval solar microgrids. AUKUS funding dwarfs climate spending, risking lock in to high emission systems, especially when we consider diesel based operations at Western Australia's naval base. Yet, ADF Australian Defence Forces report claim steadily moving towards net zero target. For instance, they mention RAF base Darwin 3.2 megawatt 9,000 panel solar farm provides about 40% of the base energy requirements and save about $130,000 a year in electricity. Robertson Barracks 10 megawatt 27,000 panel solar farm also supplies up to 40% of the base needs and it saves $409,000 a year in energy costs. However, the AUKUS submarines will operate well past 2050, clashing with the net zero climate commitment. Their 60-year lifespan means they will still be active by 2085 or 35-year past net zero target year, raising difficult question about the emission legacy of today's defense choices. While not emitting carbon dioxide during operations like diesel subs, nuclear submarines require a massive carbon intensive supply chain such as steel production, uranium mining, enrichments, reactor development, waste handling, base constructions, and maintenance, etc. We can take an example of South Korea's Hanwha that used to have defense contracts, but it has now scaled towards solar tech. According to Climate Change Authority 2025 analysis, Australia's adoption of a nuclear based energy pathway could add up to 2 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalent by 2050, far surpassing the emission projected under a renewable led approach. This delay in the energy transition risks breaching our legally bound emissions target and delaying climate aligned electricity reforms by over a decade. Energy policy chaos, cases and data. Case study shows Snowy. We must be familiar with Snowy 2. Delay Australian has cost Australia so far $12 billion plus and 7 years behind versus AUKUS smooth funding and sailing of the project. Does that show the differences of preferences at the higher policy levels? 14 gas projects were approved since 2022, but still no sign of their operationality. Conflict defense needs 24/7 power, but renewable lack storage. Solution: use sub base as virtual power plants with batteries plus offshore winds, or maybe even Tesla's VPP in South Australia. Public demand should be freedom of information request on defense energy contracts to know or maintain transparency. While Snowy 2 Flanders meant to have revolutionized Australia's energy initiative, AUKUS sailed on exposing policy hypocrisy. Initially expected to open in 2021, Snowy's 2 completion was delayed to this year but is now anticipated to be finished by December 2028, with commissioning by December 2029. The project budget has also blown out of massive amount, increasing from 2 to $12 billion. The 14 new gas projects lock in emissions. Where's the priority? Defense base needs reliable power, but instead of leading on microgrids, they burn diesel. The US Navy's Pearl Harbor solar farm saves US dollar approximately 6 million a year. Australia could replicate this at the fleet base east. Action demands, we should be demanding our Prime Minister Albanese to commit 100% renewable defense by 2035. What can public do is demand freedom of information requests to expose dirty energy contracts, mirroring United Kingdom's successful sold off campaign. What baffles me is that the system that green light diesel for naval bases or AUKUS approval delays approval for community solar such as solars, as these community support projects need to have one environmental impact assessment, second potential impacts on biodiversity, noise levels and other environmental factors, three complexity and time consuming assessments requiring detailed studies and reports, and potentially leading to project delays. In New South Wales, for instance, environmental impact assessments for significant real and renewable energy projects must also be reviewed by a registered environmental assessment practitioner. And guess what? After passing through unstreamlined planning regulations and approval processes, comes the financial stage. And if it has already been considerably delayed, the cost push inflation may make it financially unviable. At the end of the story, Australians deserve consistency, not contradictions. Global lessons, what are they for us? Actionable solutions. Policy ask amend Climate Change Act to include defense emissions. At the moment, they are not. Case study. Norway's electric vessels, one of its first vessels saved 5,700 tons of carbon dioxide emissions annually and reduced operational cost by up to 90%, inspiring widespread electrification of Norway's ferry fleet, according to AWA International 19 to 25 report. 60% of Australians oppose AUKUS, according to Lowy survey 2024, because of the cost. Public steps can be council motion to ban fossil fuel AUKUS supply chain. AUKUS R&D for green hydrogen is another Fortescue's bid. But it all also depends on our US president, where does his preferences lies. For at the moment, AUKUS doesn't seem to be in full green light to go ahead. The AUKUS spec isn't just about submarines. It also include advanced research and development in artificial intelligence, quantum, and clean energy like green hydrogen. Why? Because energy resilience is critical for defense, powering base and align with climate goals. AUKUS is therefore not just nuclear submarines, it's a backdoor to dominate clean energy. Assess and take Fortescue's bid to supply green hydrogen by leveraging AUKUS R&D. Australia could kill two birds with one stone. Secure our defense energy supply and lead the global hydrogen race. But will bureaucracy block this win-win? Norway's naval fleet proves decarbonization is possible. Australia must amend laws to regulate defense emissions like Germany's proposed military carbon budget. Lois polling shows public skepticism. Councils can disrupt AUKUS dirty supply chain. Closing call to action. Regulate defense emissions, redirect AUKUS R&D to renewables, as the contract also suggests. Freedom of information, defense energy deals to keep the transparency. Council bans on fossil fuel supply chain should be encouraged. Promoted public pressure on MPs. The climate security clashes here. Demand transparencies. If we are not going to demand, nothing will happen. Everything will pass through silently. Use council motions, campus protests, and voters' pressures like no AUKUS call. Campaign targeting MPs in coal seats. Share this toolkit to track defense emissions. Time to choose chaotic collusion or climate consciousness collaboration. For the price, just for your information, let me share with you that for the price of a single AUKUS submarine, we could fund solar panels for every renter households in the country. Isn't that a better definition of national resilience? Should we not reduce just one single submarine for the benefit of almost entire Australia for emissions? Rising energy prices and climate perspective. Energy crisis and price surges. Electricity prices up by 25% since 2022, according to Australian energy regulator, driven by gas exports profiteering plus war-linked volatility. Case study is here. 2022 East Coast gas storage forced manufacturers to halt production, and I think it is still not back to full swing. Data 78% of Australian blames energy firms for price gouging. The Australian Institute 2023. AUKUS links defense gas demands. HMAS, I think it stands for Her Majesty or His Majesty's Australian Shipping Sterling, competes with households. Solution is price caps. Sorry, plus redirect gas from LNG exports. Australia's energy crisis isn't just climate, it's corporate greed as well. Why? Households pay 24% more, 12% in gas, 16% in electricity, or just above 24, close to 25%. However, despite the consumer paying higher prices, gas giants such as Woodside posted Australian $3.6 billion net profit in 2024 compared to 1.7 billion in 2023, over 100% increase in net profits. The 2022 shortage exposed systemic failure as well. No domestic gas reserves, while 80% is exported. AUKUS may worsen this. Defense base like HMAS Sterling in Western Australia guzzle gas, competing with factories and families. Solutions impose tougher price caps, like Albanese government did in 2023. Intervention and expand WA's 15% domestic gas reservation nationwide. So, how energy is leading towards poverty or regional inequality? One in five Aussies skip meal to pay power bills. Across September 9, 2024. Case study is Tasmania's winter disconnection scores up to 40% 2023. Though some says that many people shift from Tasmania's, close their houses and move to other states, warmer states. So that's another reason for disconnection going up to 40%. But fact remains that it is happening. Sorry again. Remote indigenous communities pay 50% more for power, according to Australian Institute of Health Welfare. AUKUS link Australian dollar 368 billion submarines, divert funds from social housing solar programs. So, what is the solution? Nationwide energy efficiency subsidies plus community solar. Australian Council for Social Services AUKUS, energy poverty is a silent crisis in Tasmania. Families freeze as disconnection rise while First Nation communities pay a remote tax for diesel power. AUKUS Australian dollar 368 billion could fund 10 million home solar systems, yet defense wins. In Australians are not against Australian defense. Remember, they are against the misappropriation, the mismanagement. Why we see billions and billions. I will do a vlog telling how many $1 billion are being lost due to corruption. Why not those be used to provide benefits to the Australian taxpayers? I asked my viewers to get answer from their respected MPs. How do they explain this? Many First Nation communities are still burning diesel daily. Energy prices in general are rising and hurting overwhelming majority of Australians, while defense gets billions and worse. Dodgy NDIS operators, RTOs operators, and migrant agents and migrants who come with fake documents are siphoning off with billions of dollars. Where's the justice for ordinary and hardworking Australians? Corporate profiteering versus public pain. Gas giant made 40 billion profit in 2021, according to ACC, Australian Commission for Consumer. Australian Competition and Consumer Commission case study Shell QGC jacked up prices 300% for manufacturers. Renewable energy cut bills. ACT's 100% renewable saves Australian 100 saves $100 a year for the people residing in ACT. Windfall tax on war, energy, profiteering plus fund renewables is probably one solution. While Australians suffer, corporations cash in. I have explained it earlier. Why not we look into these activities? Tax the Titans campaign, I think, should be started. Global resistance and local wins. UK sold off campaign forced transparency in defense energy contract via freedom of information requests. A case study is Newcastle coal port protest blocked AUKUS dirty supply chain. For example, weapons shipped via fossil fuel ports. 60% of Australian oppose AUKUS according to Law Institute. Hanwha, if can pivot to solar tech after public pressure, probably Australia should consider the same. I can share with you in table scenario factor what is happening. In other words, what can happen. Net zero renewable pathway. If it is the priority, then solar, wind, hydro plus battery storage should go ahead because nuclear red scenario AUKUS is heavily dependent on nuclear build out, which required a heavy uh, emission emitting supply chain industries. Scenario factor, nuclear energy pathway, are renewable led scenario, minimum to zero nuclear. AUKUS supports submarine space infrastructure. Projected national emission by 2050 will be less than baseline emission, compatible with 43% reduction by 2030 if we go for renewable led scenarios. If we go for nuclear led scenario, the it can be up to 2 billion tons of carbon dioxide emission by 2050. Target is 82% zero emission electricity. It can be achieved by 2030 if we go for renewable led in scenario. If we went to the nuclear side, delays can go up to 2042. Alignment with net zero 2050 law. Yes, renewable led scenario can align with Paris and net zero 2050. However, in case of nuclear, it will overshoot to 30 target by 5 plus percentage points. Choice is to be made. Please comment and suggest, should we go for sustainability and meet our commitments, or should we go nuclear? Which now is in any case dependent on what the president of USA decides to do. Sorry for my sore throat. Thank you for watching and stay tuned, as next we will cover Australian digitization program and cyber threats. Till then, you take care. Bye bye for now.